Today I'm here with Dr. Kevin Youngblood, who's a professor in the Old Testament at Harding University. And he's agreed to come on and talk with me about the book of Jonah. And we're going to especially look at Jonah chapter 3 and 4, but it'll be a conversation where we probably end up all over the book. That's the nice thing about a short book. You get a chance to hop around in your conversation. But Dr. Youngblood also wrote a commentary on the Book of Jonah, which I have used recently, and it's really fantastic and a helpful book.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So, a quick question to get us started would be, what's one of your earliest memories of interacting with the story of Jonah?
Well, I can remember growing up, going to church, going to Sunday school, and you probably remember the old flannel board
Yeah.
that was used to relate so many biblical stories, both Old and New Testament. So I think my earliest memory is the big old whale that was put up on the flannel board when my Bible teachers were first introducing me to the story of Jonah. And that just captures the imagination, as you see the story come to life on the flannel board with the little paper figures placed up there. And so that's what immediately comes to mind when I think about my earliest interactions with the book is just what a great experience it was to have committed teachers who loved the Lord, who loved His Word, and who found creative ways of helping young minds like mine engage with these biblical stories.
Yeah, we used flannel board when I was a kid too, and it's so funny because now we have all the high tech. Every class has a TV in it, and there's all
Yeah.
images of it. But yeah, I similarly just remember biblical stories on flannel graph, and just I have fond memories of it, being
Absolutely.
captivated by it, and it just shows our imaginations can do more work than we often ask them to do these days.
Sure. Well, after Sunday school, we could all get up on the board and retell the story differently. You know? So we had a lot of fun with that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, well, I have a few questions that I'd like to talk to you about. One of the big questions, as I read through the Book of Jonah, one of the big questions I've always had is why so many animals? And especially, it's funny, I was talking to someone the other day and just going back through this book and remembering that, in fact, in Jonah chapter 3, the animals participate in the fast and they wear
Yes.
sackcloth. And then, of course, the book ends with God telling Jonah, I should care about the people and also these animals. So, can you talk to us? Why so many animals?
I know it's fascinating, right?
Mhm.
It really is a prominent feature of the book, and it does raise a lot of questions. So there's a lot of different directions one could go with discussing how the book is using the animals and how they factor in even to the book's theological message. So let's begin with just something that the prophets all kind of share. It's not unusual in prophetic texts for animals to be juxtaposed to humans
Hmm.
as a kind of comparison and contrast regarding how they respond to Yahweh's commands and commissions. Animals are generally portrayed in prophetic literature as very compliant
Hmm.
with Yahweh's will and with his natural law and with his commands. Animals just automatically obey. It's like they understand their role in the created order and they simply accept it without resistance.
Hmm.
And this is what, of course, Yahweh wishes to see in his people
Hmm. Hmm.
is that kind of compliance, that kind of recognition of their role in the created order and a willingness to simply accept it and respond with immediate humility and submission. So I think the animals function this way in Jonah as they do in other prophetic texts, particularly as they are contrasted with Jonah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So Jonah is primarily the anti-hero.
Yeah.
Uh, and so what happens is many other characters in the book are used as foils for Jonah to highlight how stubborn he is, how he struggles with the divine mercy, how he wrestles to understand how divine mercy and divine justice interact without canceling each other out.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing that comes to mind. So you think also, for example, of Balaam's donkey
Yeah.
plays a similar role. You think about maybe the first chapter of Isaiah, where Isaiah contrasts how the ox knows his owner and the donkey knows his master's crib, but my people do not know, they do not understand. That kind of contrast is probably at work in what's going on as Jonah is drawing very deeply from that prophetic tradition. The other thing that I think is going on with the animals in Jonah is that Jonah also, the whole book, really appeals to and alludes to Genesis
Hmm.
over and over and over again, especially Genesis 1 through 11. And I think the reason for that is because the backdrop of the book of Jonah is wishing to recall a time when God was appealing to all humanity,
Hmm.
in fact, to all creation. And so Genesis 1 through 11 is a perfect backdrop for Jonah in a book where God is wishing to convey the wideness of his mercy, the full extent of his redemptive vision and goals. So, as you think about Genesis 1 through 11, you certainly think of creation with the way that animals and humanity are all functioning together in the first two chapters.
Hmm.
But you also think of the flood. And the flood in particular is a significant reference point for the book of Jonah because Jonah has already in chapter 2 been cast as a kind of Noah figure,
Hmm.
someone who is saved from the waters.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So, um, as Jonah fulfills a kind of antitype role vis-a-vis Noah, the animals similarly play a role in extending the typology of the flood story to remind us that God's intentions has always been to see to it that animals are redeemed from having to bear the consequences of human sin, just as humans are to be redeemed from the consequences of their own sin. And I wonder if Jonah isn't signaling that
Hmm.
again, that God's mercy is so incredibly broad that it doesn't just extend beyond Israel to the nations. It
Yeah.
extends beyond humanity
Hmm.
to the animal world, to all creation. And so we might be getting here a nod towards the new creation.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is not unique to Jonah either. We do
Hmm.
see other prophetic texts envision a future where the predator-prey
Yeah.
relationship is reversed or done away with as the lion lies down with the lamb, all that kind of thing. The lion eats straw like the ox. You know,
Hmm.
if we think of that from Isaiah 11. So I think that Jonah is participating in that as well, uh, in a perhaps a somewhat lighter-hearted way, but making a very similar point. So I think of those two things certainly come to mind as directions that Jonah might be going.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe finally, the animals also in a way serve to kind of underscore Assyrian ignorance.
Hmm.
You know, that one of the points that God makes towards the end, right before his final shot, with allusion to the cattle
Hmm.
that populate Nineveh, he says, "This city is composed of people who do not know their right hand from their left."
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right, and so the emphasis that God places there on how that Assyria does not have access to the special revelation that Israel has. They don't know Torah. Jonah does.
Hmm.
And so this means that Jonah comes under greater scrutiny. Jonah should expect to be judged more stringently. So the fact that the Ninevites that their repentance looks off kilter to Jonah is quite beside the point. They're doing the best they can with the knowledge that they have, and Jonah didn't make that none too easy either.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So I think maybe the animals kind of are also kind of used as a reference to Nineveh's ignorance,
Yeah.
lack of access to special revelation,
Yeah.
and how that this is their first experience with a prophet, a Hebrew prophet anyway. So I think those three things are probably a mix
Yeah.
of those are what is operating here. But yeah, all through the book,
Yeah.
the fish, the worm that comes up in chapter 4, just
Yeah.
creation in general, I think is playing a crucial role here and gives Jonah really a bit of a wisdom cast to
Yeah.
it as well, where you can see how that there seems to be like a wisdom strain running through the book too, which makes it all the more fascinating to see wisdom literature and prophetic literature interacting this way.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, as I was thinking about these animals throughout the book, and then also we could throw in the wind, then the plant
Yeah.
we talked
Yeah,
about.
now yeah, other elements
Yeah.
of the sea,
Yeah, yeah. So
the
all of
ship.
creation, and even Jonah's declaration that God is the God of the land and the sea.
Right.
There, I was thinking, oh, that's initially, my thought is, oh, that's pretty unique. But then I remember in the New Testament also where Paul talks about creation groaning, and
Exactly.
and then all of these creatures that are longing for redemption, and I just realized we often in the West, especially, don't think in these terms uh,
Right.
so holistically of creation, and yet it's just shot through the whole Bible, and so in some sense it comes out more clearly in the Book of Jonah in a more like
Yeah.
vibrant way. But if you pause and think, it's really there throughout. It's a common thread, like you've explained, but it
Yeah.
goes right into the New Testament as well.
Yeah. Right.
So it's fantastic. Okay, another question that I wanted to ask you is, why do we wait till Jonah chapter 4 to figure out why Jonah is running from God?
Yes. I think that is a key element of the book's rhetorical strategy, actually. Jonah is basically a parody of a prophetic call narrative.
Mhm.
And
And could you
as Norman
explain
Hobble
a
has,
prophetic call narrative quickly for those who might not?
yeah. So this is a very standard feature of prophetic books where the prophet relates how he was called into the prophetic ministry.
Mhm.
And the remarkable thing about all of these accounts of where how prophets were called into their ministries, they bear marked similarities. And one particular Old Testament scholar, Norman Hobble, noted that they all share the same basic form, and so he suggested a genre
Mhm.
of prophetic call narrative, and his work has really kind of been the basis ever since of analyzing and comparing these different prophets and their memories of being called into God's service. All of them are kind of based on the textbook example of Moses
Mhm.
in Exodus 3 and 4. And so that kind of gives you the basic framework, and then all of them kind of follow that. And I think that's intentional because all of these subsequent prophets are kind of prophets in the mold of Moses. So Moses kind of is the prototypical Hebrew prophet, um, and all prophetic succession points back to him as we await the prophet like Moses.
Yeah.
Of course, Deuteronomy 34 reminds us that no prophet yet has arisen that equals Moses, which makes Jesus' surpassing him all the more, of course, climactic in the New Testament. But that's what I mean when I talk about a prophetic call narrative.
Mhm.
And a key element of the prophetic call narrative, which usually falls around the third element or so of Hobble's points of comparison, his points of the structure, is the prophetic objection to the call,
Mhm.
which everywhere else is verbal. It's a verbal objection. So remember Moses says, "Oh, I'm not eloquent.
Mhm.
I have a speech impediment, whatever uncircumcised of lips means."
Yeah, yeah.
Moses is suggesting he's the wrong guy. Jeremiah is too young,
Yeah.
right? Isaiah is too sinful,
Mhm.
right? All of them give reasons why they should not be uh, candidates for the call of God.
Mhm.
And God confronts these objections right away and overrules them.
Mhm.
What's interesting in Jonah's case is that in the initial call, Jonah's objection is nonverbal,
Mhm.
and this is unique. This is unusual, and so all we know is that Jonah flees. He flees the divine commission. This is really interesting and deliberate because it's the narrator's way of inviting the reader to speculate. as to Jonah's motives, right? And it's a trap
Hmm. That's
because
interesting.
yeah, because our speculating about Jonah's motives exposes our motives,
Oh, that's really good.
right? So we what winds up happening is we say, well, this is why I would run, right?
Yeah.
And we don't realize that we're stepping right into the narrator's rhetorical trap
Hmm.
by encouraging us to speculate, to fill in the information gaps. And there's a number of information gaps throughout the book of Jonah that the reader does have to fill in. And then you find out later, then that information is given later out of place, and it winds up subverting your suppositions, right? Your
Yeah.
speculations wind up usually being wrong. All right. So that's what happens here. And so that portion of the call narrative, that objection, is postponed in Jonah to chapter 4
Hmm.
because that's the theological linchpin of the whole book.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, right? So by postponing it, it's highlighted in a way that really makes it pop out from the rest of the narrative. And let's face it, this is a really good narrative.
Yeah. That's great.
This is a brilliantly told story. So a lot of its elements shine, and it's just charming and engrossing. So the theological um, the theological punchline has to be especially noticeable. It has to be underscored because it so easily could fade into the brilliance of the whole narrative. So I think this displacement serves to highlight it. And I read the whole book as being kind of a macro staircase parallelism.
Okay.
And so this actually becomes an element that doesn't have a parallel in the first half of the book,
Okay. And when you
which
say parallelism, we're saying the first part corresponds to the fourth part, second part to
exactly,
the third part.
exactly.
You
The the
can
the
lay
book
that
is
out
yeah, the
across
book
Jonah.
is pretty symmetrical
Okay.
in that, the first two chapters constitute the first half of the book. Well, then chapter 3, verse 1 starts over
Mm-hmm.
almost verbatim like chapter 1, verse 1, which strongly suggests that we have a parallel plot line that runs very similarly to the first, but then those differences stand out,
Hmm.
right? As we know from micro parallelism in Hebrew poetry, we remember that even though there's a lot of repetition, there's always some difference.
Hmm.
There's always something in the second half or the second line that stands out, and that's really the point of the parallelism. The similarity serves the contrast.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the postponed rationale for Jonah's flight functions in chapter 4. It's this unparalleled addition to the second half of the book that stands out precisely because it lacks a parallel
Mm.
in the first half. This is what we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
And the narrator has strung us along with suspense as we have been speculating and speculating about Jonah's reasons, only to be surprised at what they actually are.
Yeah. And what would you say they actually are? How would you characterize? Because you listen to, I think in my life, if I listened to a sermon when I was younger, especially I come from a Pentecostal background with a heavy emphasis on global missions. And so
Sure,
Jonah was a missionary gone wrong story.
exactly
I think in
right.
more recent years, it's become more of almost a lesson in racism, where
Mhm.
Jonah becomes sort of xenophobic, the Ninevites. And so that's been a shift in my life to see sort of
Yeah,
the emphasis. But I wonder if
yeah.
either of those quite actually capture what's happening in
I,
Jonah.
I think both of those place the emphasis on the wrong syllable. First of all, I don't think Jonah is really xenophobic.
Yeah.
Everyone hated Assyria.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, that was just Assyria is not some innocent Gentile nation. I mean, they are brutal.
Yeah.
Uh, and but that's
Plenty
precisely
of reason to not like Assyria.
exactly,
Plenty of
but
reason.
that's precisely what gives Jonah its power.
Hmm.
This is the enemy everyone loves to hate.
Hmm.
And of course, we've forgotten that because we're so distant from the Neo-Assyrian Empire
Hmm.
and are not very familiar with their records of an unbelievable brutality.
Hmm.
But those are the waters, no pun intended, the waters in which Jonah swims,
Yeah.
right? So this is very very much so this is not about xenophobia. This is about loving your enemies.
Hmm.
I mean, loving really, really bad,
Hmm.
cruel enemies. I mean, enemies that are seeking your existential extinction.
Hmm.
That's the kind of enemies that we're talking about. So the point then of the postponed rationale is this: Jonah's offended by grace.
Hmm.
God's grace is offensive. It's his mercy is scandalous. And while Jonah is only too happy to receive God's grace, as he is in chapter 2,
Hmm.
he's not so happy to extend it to his enemies, as we see in chapter 4. And I think that's the real point of the book. It's
Yeah.
applicable, of course, to missions, and
Yeah.
it's applicable to racism.
Yeah.
It speaks to those issues,
Yeah.
but that's not what the book is primarily about.
Yeah.
The book is hitting something that is deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's confronting a root issue that gives rise to hesitancy to participate in global missions, or that gives rise to a suspicion of foreigners,
Yeah.
and which of course morphs into racism and so forth. So it's actually tapping into something deeper that is at the root of both of
Yeah.
those things. And but I think again that's what makes the book so powerful and so universally applicable, and why it has survived.
Yeah.
Its power remains undiminished
Yeah.
to this very day. But that I think is the main issue: is that you cannot be saved by grace until you've been offended by grace.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Yeah, that's a great point. You know, one of the things as I've been working through this book again, also just remembering that Jonah's issue is not with an unfamiliarity with God. He's deeply aware of what God is probably going to do. And and he's not happy about it. You know,
Yeah,
he's like, and there's some sense in what his objection is, you know, you were going to turn me into a false prophet because I'm going to say this, but I know that if they just show some sense of repentance and you're going to show compassion, and that Jonah's not happy about that.
right, right.
Yeah, which
Well,
is,
it's that's very true, and you begin to realize it's interesting that Jonah flees the first commission, but he doesn't flee the second,
mhm,
and there's a difference there.
mhm.
So this must have been a suspicion, like you said, that
Yeah,
Jonah had upon receiving the first commission that prompted him to flee.
yeah,
Then at the end, when he complains to God that God has shown Nineveh clemency, he says, "You fooled me."
yeah,
Something about that second commission convinced Jonah to go.
yeah.
And then whatever his impressions were, they're disappointed.
Yeah. Which you know, and I think it was in your commentary, you talk about the verb in the message that God gives to Jonah,
Yeah.
how it's ambiguous.
Yeah, the
It's
nifal of
often,
Hafak,
yeah,
right?
it's awfully often translated as to be overthrown.
Right.
And it seems that this is a negative, but
Hmm.
there's sort of a wordplay that might be going on.
Certainly. Yeah, it's an intentional ambiguity.
Mhm.
You almost feel like this is the Delphic Oracle here, right? Where, what God says, Jonah interprets one way, the Ninevites interpret a different way,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then you've got a competition of hermeneutics, as it were, a competition of interpretations. God winds up siding with Nineveh,
yeah.
much to Jonah's chagrin. Yeah, one of the differences between the second commission and the first is that in the second commission, Yahweh actually tells Jonah the content of the oracle he'll be uh, announcing to Nineveh. Now, we the readers don't get to overhear it,
Hmm.
which is again a deliberate information gap.
Yeah.
It's like it's like Yahweh and Jonah pull aside, and Yahweh whispers in his ear. We don't get to hear
Hmm.
until Jonah actually announces it a little bit later in chapter 3. But that's when we hear the verb overthrow, right? Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown or transformed,
Hmm.
turned around, right? The verb is used in both ways.
Yeah.
So it becomes fascinating to see how that Jonah's go-to interpretation is destruction,
Yeah.
because that's what he wants.
Hmm.
Whereas the Ninevites go to interpretation is turned around because
Yeah.
that's what they want.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant way of showing us our biased hermeneutic, right? Our
Yeah.
biased interpretation. We will be drawn to those interpretations that align with our desires,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And Jonah's desire is to see Nineveh destroyed, and of course, the Ninevites' desire is to see themselves spared.
Yeah.
Um, Yahweh, isn't it interesting that Yahweh sides with the more merciful
Yeah.
interpretation?
Yeah. Wow, which is that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, it's one of my favorite verses in this whole story because
Yeah,
yeah, it seems so harsh, and yet in the English translations you can't catch this, but in the Hebrew you can see that, and it's a really beautiful thing.
yeah,
So I got one more question for you, and this is obviously too big of a question for the amount of time that we'll have left here. But if you could just tease out some connections between Jonah and Jesus,
yeah.
just from this book.
Wow, there are so many. The obvious one, of course, is the story of Jesus asleep on the boat with
Hmm.
his disciples when a squall comes on the Sea of Galilee.
Hmm.
And you automatically see the parallels here. Jonah is asleep on the boat while there's a storm at sea. Jesus is asleep on a boat while there's a storm at sea. Jonah's shipmates wake him, scared to death,
Hmm.
wondering why he's not helping. Jesus' shipmates wake him, scared to death, wondering why he's not helping. So once again, it's a situation where you're creating a parallel in
Hmm.
order to highlight a difference. And the main difference here is that while Jonah is fleeing his calling, Jonah is running away from his calling. Jesus is running towards his.
Yeah.
And even the imagery of Jesus asleep on the boat, it kind of foreshadowing his death,
Mm.
and then he rises from that sleep to still the storm, kind of foreshadowing his resurrection.
Hmm.
But maybe the bigger point here is that Jesus doesn't share his shipmates' fear because he knows this can't be his end.
Hmm.
He's destined to die a different way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting to see how that Jesus is running to his calling
Yeah.
while Jonah is running away. So their running may look very similar,
Yeah.
but the directions they're headed are opposite. And I think that's kind of the point. Jonah is serving as kind of a foil for Jesus
Yeah.
and is confronting us with a similar kind of question. Will you run towards the cross or away from it?
Hmm.
Will you run towards the calling of God to lay your life down for others, or will you run away from
Yeah.
that calling? And I think Jonah and Jesus are running in opposite directions. But if you were to just look at their running, it looks very much the same.
Yeah.
There are others, though, of course, Jesus makes a number of comparisons of himself with Jonah in the Gospels. Here's another related example. In Matthew 16, when we hear Jesus's first passion prediction, and Peter immediately begins to object to the idea of Jesus going to the cross. Before that, of course, Jesus asks them, "Who do you say that I am?" Right? Who do men say that I am, and who do you say that I am? And Peter, in one of his better moments, confesses, "You are the Messiah." And he says, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar Jonah."
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And Jonah isn't actually Simon's father's name. It's John, as we know from elsewhere. So Jesus has deliberately made an association here of Peter with Jonah. And I think that's deliberate because look at what Peter's doing. Jesus has just announced, "I'm going to the cross." And Peter says, "No, you're not." Peter's running away from the cross. Jesus is running to it.
Interesting.
And so Simon Peter right now looks very much like Jonah, right?
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's
then
fascinating.
Peter later on in the book of Acts, guess where Peter is when he receives the vision that sends him to Cornelius's house?
Oh, is he in Joppa?
He's in Joppa
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's
at
great.
Simon the tanner's house. He's at the very port where Jonah sought to flee the Gentile mission.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
the
that's
very
great.
port where God calls Peter to launch the Gentile mission.
Oh wow. That's a really wonderful connection. I don't, I think I read that. My church is even going through the Book of Acts recently. We went through that passage just in the last couple months, and I think I had thought Saul of Tarsus and Tarshish. Anyways, try to make it, but I missed this much more clear connection here,
Yes,
John. But
yeah. Well, Paul also is shipwrecked, and
Mhm.
he's in a ship situation that is very reminiscent of Jonah too. So it seems like after Jesus shows the alternative to Jonah's flight, his disciples follow suit,
Yeah,
right? And so they recall Jonah. Peter recalls Jonah. Paul recalls Jonah,
yeah,
as they show that disciples of the Lord Jesus are encouraged to learn from Jonah, to
yeah,
learn from his lesson,
yeah.
to be offended by grace,
Mhm.
because we all will be,
Mhm.
but then to embrace it,
Yeah.
embrace the scandal that is God's mercy.
Yeah, well, I think that's a beautiful spot to end our conversation. So obviously your commentary is really wonderful. We'll put a link to it here if anyone
Great, thank
wants to
you.
check it
Yes.
out. Are there any other projects or anything that you're working on?
Yeah, I have a couple of things now. I do have something that is on the verge of coming out.
Oh, cool.
I co-edited a survey of the Old Testament with a colleague of mine at Abilene Christian named Gilnam Cha. It's called Adaptable for Life: The Message of the Old Testament for Contemporary Readers. I wrote six of the chapters, and that other chapters were contributed by various other authors. But it's a great survey of the Old Testament that is good for anyone that's just getting into it and
Great.
wanting to learn the ropes. So lots of great scholars have contributed to that one. So looking forward to that. That will be out by Whip and Stock. I am currently writing another volume for the same Zondervan commentary series as the one I wrote for Jonah on Lamentations.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and that one's not as imminent.
Still got the work.
I keep getting delayed in getting that one finished, but I am hopeful to get that completed and for that to come out with the remainder of the Zcot volumes, the Zondervan exegetical commentary on the Old Testament. So those two are the ones that are at the forefront right now of my attention.
Well, that's awesome. Well, once again, thanks so much for joining me today and having this conversation. It's been a lot of fun.
A pleasure, Tyler. Thank you. God bless.